You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Good morning, and welcome to the I Still Love This Game podcast. Game 1 is in the books, and it was a solid Game 1. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about that Game 1. We're going to be talking about Game 2 as well, looking ahead, making more predictions. But Game 1, I enjoyed Game 1, and I received some texts from a few people, and they were like, oh, this is boring, you know, especially during the first quarter and a half, where the defense was apparent. Hey, look, the NBA Finals is much more of a filling out process than the other rounds, typically, because the other rounds, at the very least, you're playing somebody from your own conference. So you're playing them a little bit more frequently, and especially if they're a division rival, you're playing them a lot more frequently than what you're going to play in the NBA Finals. And the potential of, you know, playing somebody in the NBA first round, in the NBA playoffs, or the second round, is much higher than making the finals and playing them as well. So they may have played them a couple of times previously in the playoffs, as opposed to, you know, very rarely, say, the Toronto Raptors, for example, finally breaking through and getting to the finals. So it was definitely a feeling out process, especially, and then when we take into account the injuries as well, they're still getting acclimated to playing alongside each other, let alone playing against somebody else in the NBA Finals. So the feeling out process, that was definitely happening in the first half. But the thing that jumped out at me, and I know I picked the Warriors in 6, and I'm not jumping off that just yet, but the thing that jumped out at me is this was very reminiscent to me of 2016. And I'm not saying that because Kevin Durant wasn't playing. It's just the lack of offensive depth. This is the same situation for Golden State. And what I'm saying by that is you can still get production from Steph Curry, you can still get production from Klay Thompson, even though we really didn't see a whole lot from Thompson. He had, 20 points? But Steph Curry had 35, 34 points, whatever it was, and he seemed dominant. He was obviously getting the shots, but outside of those two players, I don't think anyone else had double figures, with the exception of Draymond Green, and he did not shoot the ball that well. And he had a lot of turnovers too. So the problems that Golden State run is, look, I think it was Jeff Van Gundy that said it, their best offense was actually missed shots and second chance opportunities and dishing it outside after an offensive rebound to a corner three. If that's their best offense, they're in a lot of trouble. They're in a hell of a lot of trouble, because when you think about Steph Curry, 34 points, I pulled it up just here, 34 points, Klay Thompson 21 points, and yes, Draymond Green had 10 points. He had a triple-double too. 10 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, but 6 turnovers. He also had 5 fouls and a plus-minus of -8. But now I'm looking down at the Toronto Raptors, and Kawhi Leonard shot the ball pretty badly, 23 points. So you take into account that Steph Curry goes to 34 points. Kawhi Leonard is only 5 of 14 and only puts up 23 points. And yet the Raptors win by essentially 10 points. That's pretty alarming. And yeah, I know Siakam went for 32. You can probably say, well, that's not going to happen again. Maybe it will. Because if you watch the game, the Warriors seem quite content with allowing the other Raptors to get into their positions of comfort. And Siakam was one of them. Danny Green was another one. He started making a couple of threes, especially early on. I thought that was huge. Not just for his own personal confidence, but the rest of the team's confidence too. Van Fleet was big for them, as well as Marc Gasol. Kyle Lowry, I'm not sure if he's going to get a lot of backlash for this. He shouldn't. He went 2 of 9, but you know, he put the dagger in at the end of the game too with a huge 3. The game was pretty much over at that point, but it was nice to see that. But he played excellent on defense, and his plus-minus is an indication of that too, because he was plus 11 despite the poor shooting. So the point that I'm making, though, you've got to be concerned if you're Golden State. And this is the first time since 2015 that they've been in the finals, and they've been down in the NBA Finals, and the series has been live. So what I mean by that is, obviously they were down 4-3 at the end of the series in 2016, but that series wasn't live at that point. It was over. So you got to go all the way back to when they were down 2-1 against Golden State, and that's with LeBron, obviously, and Mozgov, and Dellavedova, and those guys, Tristan Thompson, J.R. Smith. That was the last time they were down in the finals. That's a long time. And I said, leading into this final series, how is Toronto going to be able to manage and stay focused with the excitement and the expectations around them? Now the backs are the Golden State's, their backs are firmly against the wall here. Game 2 is not a must win, but it'll go a long way to, if they go down 2-0 and Kevin Durant's out for the rest of the series, and we see Kawhi Leonard break out of a bad shooting performance, or Golden State makes adjustments and allows Kawhi Leonard to actually have a little bit more room to operate in order to slow some of the other guys down, they could be in for a long series, or actually it could be a short series, and Toronto wins, because I see so much more energy, so much more speed on the perimeter from the Toronto Raptors. And it's one of those situations when we look at it, when we look back at this, and if Toronto does run away with the series, we should have known better. And I was one of the few that was more generous in Toronto's chances than a lot more of other people. They thought the sweeps or 5-game series, or they would scoff if you even mentioned that this could go to 6 or 7. But when you look at who Toronto had to go through as opposed to who Golden State had to go through, I know Kevin Durant wasn't healthy, but they struggled up against the Clippers. They went up against the Rockets, who disappointed mightily. And then they swept the Blazers, who looked completely out of their depth. Now compare that to the Raptors, who, they had to go into Philly. They had to win a 7-game series and finish that series off. They had to win Game 4 on the road, which was essentially a must-win situation. And then they won 4 straight up against the Bucks. And the Bucks, they had a lot of speed on the perimeter too, especially, not just especially, but on both ends of the court. So when we look back at it, Toronto has had a much more impressive playoff run this season than what Golden State has. So we should not be surprised by this. And I'm not surprised by it. I know the reaction by a lot of people will be that of surprise and shock. But we shouldn't be shocked by this at all. And if Kevin Durant... Now the problem that the Warriors have is there's 2 problems. First of all, they've never been a good team at adjusting. Ever. They've been good at recruiting talent. I'll give you that. Whether it's drafting or free agent signings. But in terms of game-to-game adjustments, and obviously in-game adjustments, this is why I don't rate Steve Kerr as a great coach. He's not a Pat Riley. He's not a Phil Jackson. He's not someone that can actually figure out who they actually have at his disposal. And it takes a while for him to actually figure it out. And the only counter to that is you can say, well, what about Andre Iguodala when they started him after, I mentioned this a second ago, when they were down 2-1 in 2015 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And that's a decent point, but it took him up until Game 4 to figure that out. If they wait till Game 4 before they make any type of adjustment, they're not in a good position. And I don't know what adjustment they could make. Maybe bring Cousins into the starting lineup, but he's name value only. He looked very, very weak. Let me pull those stats up again while I'm talking. But he looked very, very weak in pick and roll defense, and he was kind of exposed by that. So I mean, Cousins 8 points, didn't make a shot from 8 minutes, didn't make a shot from the field. He had 3 points, all from the foul line. He had 2 assists and a -1 in the plus minus. That's not great production. He's not your answer. Especially when you figure out that, hey, if you can give him more minutes, then they're really going to attack him. The other thing that you've got to be concerned with is how serious was Kevin Durant's injury. And the reason I say that is if Golden State was willing to march out Cousins, but not Kevin Durant, that's telling you a lot. This is the NBA Finals. This is not a rest situation. I can understand them resting Kevin Durant for Game 6 up against the Rockets, knowing that you have Game 7 at home. I totally get that. I can also understand them sort of resting him up against Portland. Let's see how Portland responds. They didn't respond, so they rested him the whole series. But Game 1 of the NBA Finals, up against a team that's got a lot of confidence after winning Game 6, or winning 4 straight, really, against the best regular season team in the NBA in Milwaukee, they had a lot of confidence. And now they're going to have even more confidence. This was a situation that if he was healthy, even if he was at 50%, you would have wanted him out there. Just to at least draw some of that defensive attention away from Curry and away from Thompson. So what's going on here with that? You've got to, and the fact that they were willing to put Cousins out there shows you that they probably were aware that this was a situation where they wanted to take this game. They wanted game one. So if they're willing to put Cousins out there, but they're not willing to put Kevin Durant out there, maybe the rift is so bad there internally. It's either that, or he's a lot more hurt than what they've let on. And they maybe it was a much more serious injury than what we were told. And the reason for that is maybe it didn't allow other teams to build their confidence up. So, for example, if it's a 3-2 situation up against Houston and Kevin Durant's day-to-day as opposed to being ruled out of the playoffs, maybe the Rockets didn't smell blood the way they should have. Same with Portland. Maybe Portland, because if Kevin Durant is questionable or game-time decision, even though he's out for the rest of the playoffs, they didn't smell blood. They didn't see the situation in front of them. That's just a theory. It's either one or the other. Because that was a situation where they should have played him if he was available in any capacity. And yet they didn't. So that's something interesting looking forward. But I don't see a whole lot. I'm not jumping off the peak. Don't confuse that. But I don't see a whole lot of offensive firepower that Golden State has with Durant out to counter what Toronto can do defensively to them. So I love it, bro. I absolutely love it because this is what the finals is all about. I really it's not the crap that we saw last year where teams sort of give in or cave in, or we're talking about J.R. Smith for the next 12 months. I hate that. I really I despise that. I prefer to talk about the chess match. And this is what a lot of fans have reached out to me during this playoffs and say how boring it is because they don't see the intensity. And the intensity, the thing that I really like about the NBA playoffs, but it's been severely lacking over the last couple of years, is the intrigue from game to game. What adjustments are going to be made and whether they'll be effective. And if the adjustments are made, what are the counter adjustments going to be made by the opposite team? The ball is firmly in the court of Golden State now to make some adjustments. I don't know what they can make, though. In theory, they did everything right. They took the ball out of Kawhi Leonard's hands. Kawhi Leonard was not effective. But Marc Gasol, Siakam, those guys, Van Fleet had a big game as well off the bench. His energy is very, very important. So when you look at it from that standpoint, what else can they do? Do they then go back to saying, okay, we're not going to bleed points to these role players, but that allows Kawhi Leonard and gives him the room and the space to operate. Maybe you do that. Maybe you go with that, especially the way that Kawhi Leonard looked. He athletically, he did not look that great. It looked like he was limping and a 3/4 pace the whole game. Maybe he was pacing himself. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But if you're Golden State, I don't think the strategy of, anyone else can beat us with the exception of Kawhi Leonard necessarily works because there's a lot of depth there. And Kyle Lowry did not play that well from a shooting standpoint. If he picks up his game on top of it, Serge Ibaka did not shoot the ball very well either. If those guys are able to elevate their performances, which they are capable of doing, even if Durant comes back, this is a scary situation for Golden State. So leading into game 2, I don't know what they are going to necessarily do in terms of making those adjustments. Maybe the only adjustment they have is Kevin Durant. But if he's not available for game 1, what makes us think he's going to be available for game 2? Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I'm just looking at it from a realistic standpoint. Now, if they bring in Kevin Durant for game 2, then the fireworks are on. Game 1 was essentially a warm-up in that situation. And we're going to go through another filling out process because he makes such a big impact on both ends of the court. So it'll be interesting to see. And I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys enjoyed it because it was, especially the first quarter and a half, that was intense playoff basketball, intense finals basketball, which we haven't really seen in the last couple of years. We've seen big scores in the first quarters, especially game one. And now we're finally starting to see a little bit more of that defensive energy and intensity. Look, if I'm Golden State, unless if Curry is ridiculous or Klay Thompson is ridiculous, or Kevin Durant comes back, they're in a lot of trouble. They really are. And let's not forget about the ability for Nick Nurse to make adjustments on his end. So Golden State may make an adjustment, but Nurse is a good enough coach to actually counter that adjustment in game. So we've got a couple of days. Golden State has a couple of days to figure out what they want to do, how they want to do it, and I'm intrigued, absolutely intrigued. Anyway, so this is going to be a short episode because it is 5:30 in the morning. I was going to do this episode last night, but I got a bit tired. So 5:30 in the morning, the birds are chirping. That is my cue to get ready for work. Guys, I hope you enjoyed game one. I hope you're looking forward to game two. Send me through your thoughts. That's a mouthful to say at 5:30 in the morning. And hey, I might do a live stream on Instagram at halftime of game two. I might not. Keep your notifications ready in case I do. Anyway, guys, I hope you have a great day. It's Friday already. Thank goodness for that Memorial Day break that we got from Monday. It's already Friday. It's already the weekend. I'm looking forward to the weekend. Thanks for joining me and hanging out with me early in the morning, and I'll catch you guys just after game two.